Okay, fantastic. Hi everyone, this is Stacy Henderson from Keep, and thank you so much for joining our series for Women's History Month. And today I am so excited to have Alla Farberov. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yeah.
Okay.
After all these years.
After all these years, right. Alla is the Vice President of Merchandising and Retail at Roberto Cavalli. And I just have to put in a personal note, I've known Alla for the past 10 years, decade?
Probably 11.
11 years, and I am so happy that she's doing this because, like most women who you've seen, she's one of the hardest working women in fashion that I know. I've experienced it firsthand. So if we start to laugh and talk about some inside jokes, it's because I've known and worked with her probably longer than anyone in New York City. So with that being the case, I want to get started on Alla's career, and just to take a little step back. We have been featuring women from fashion who have careers in fashion, and our series is called Style and Grit, because we know with the glamour and the style and looking good every day, there's also a lot of hard work that goes into it, right? So Alla, let's get started with you and about your career. How did you get started in fashion? What was your first fashion job?
Well, I actually got started after college. I actually did not get a degree in fashion, and I did try out to do what I went to school for, of course.
What was
and that? Healthcare administration.
It's so fun to hear all this. Elisa was medicine, right? Mm-hmm. So yes, okay.
And after about 8 months of working in healthcare, I realized that I really want to go into fashion. Before that, I decided to get my master's and landed a job actually working as an assistant manager at a store.
Oh, great.
So that's kind of how I started. I was there for about 1.5 years and then realized that I don't need a master's degree to do what I want to do, and that I just want to get into the corporate headquarters of a fashion company. And I guess it was, people say right place, right time. I guess that's what it was for me. And I just went to my manager and I said, listen, I really want to work for the company, but I'm just not sure store is the place where I want to be. I want to try corporate headquarters. And I was given an opportunity with Max Mara, which is where I started my career, to move into the headquarters.
Oh, great.
In New York City.
In New York City.
So not in Europe, of course, but in New York City.
It's interesting you mentioned Max Mara, because I know we talked about a quote from Max Mara, I think, the last time. But it's interesting, and I just want to say this to our viewers, that you went to your boss and you were like, look, I love it, this is cool and all, but I think there's something else for me, right?
Correct.
And how did your boss receive that news?
She actually was extremely supportive.
Yeah.
She actually said, you know what, I don't think you're cut out for this retail in-store thing. She said, I think you'll be perfect for wholesale. And I was like, wholesale, what's that? And of course, at that time, I was much younger.
Yep.
I said, okay, I can try that. Selling in the store, selling in a showroom, I guess can't be that different. You gotta have the skill and the passion. And she really helped me. She helped me speak to the HR. She helped me get in there and really gave me probably the best recommendation I could have gotten from anyone.
So this is super important, because I know that we talk about this a lot on Style and Grit. So when you went to your boss, right, obviously you were doing a good enough job for her to then promote you, obviously, to go into the next thing, correct?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Because sometimes we've gotten a couple of questions from our followers asking, so I don't like my job now, I'm slacking off a bit, can I just go ask for something else? So it seems like the number one rule is, regardless of where you want to be, you have to first make sure that with the job that you have, you're doing a great job, and that you're not slacking off. Perfect.
Exactly.
Perfect. Let's take a step back, because I've always been fascinated by your career and what you do, because I don't do it and I didn't know much about it until I joined the fashion industry. So at Versace, so just to give everyone a point of reference, we worked together at Versace. I was in charge of the marketing, and Alla was in charge of the buying, right? Mm-hmm. Which then became buying and merchandising. What does a buyer do? The reason why I'm so intrigued by this, I've always wanted to be a buyer, because I always thought about putting on glamorous clothes and walking into a showroom and picking 3 things and going home. Is that how it is?
Yes, we just walk in, go shopping, You know, it's so funny you asked that question because I think till this day, my family doesn't really understand what I do.
Yes.
So when I say I'm going on a trip to Italy, they're like, oh, so you're gonna bring clothes back? And I'm like, kind of. Eventually we bring it back. But, you know, I think the starting point for a buyer is always analytical.
Oh, wow.
And the actual job is more analytical than it is the picking out of the clothes.
So help me understand this. So as a buyer, what's your overall goal? It's obviously to just go and shop and buy, right? What is your goal? When you are a buyer, what makes a good buyer? Just talk about what a buyer does.
Achieve a sell-through, to have healthy margins, and obviously profitable business.
What does sell-through mean?
It's how much you bought versus how much you sold. So if you bought $100 worth of product and you sold $50 worth of product at full price,
Yep.
you are at a 50% sell-through, which, you know, for most luxury fashion brands, especially ready to wear, that's a pretty high percentage. While you're thinking, okay, and I know Stacy, she is very financially driven, so she would not accept 50%. But yes, I mean, you do want to get to the highest possible percentage. You don't want to be too high either in a way, because that means you probably underbought. You probably could have done a lot more, because if you're getting to like a 75% sell-through, which is like unbelievable, right? You probably could have done more.
Could have bought more. So then go back to what you were saying with analytical. So there's a lot of like data and looking at numbers.
A lot.
Okay.
A lot of analysis, and the analysis, you know, could be anything from analyzing a single item to analyzing clients to analyzing the geographic area, and all of that is linked together. And you know, in general, you have to pay attention to detail, and buying is probably one of the most detailed and tedious type of jobs in fashion, in retail.
So I have a question then, just take a step back. You mentioned going to Milan, and I know people think, like I thought, you go to Milan, you walk into a showroom, you pick out 2 black dresses, and you know, and you think you just pick out stuff you like. But it sounds to me that you're looking at what you're going to actually sell in the store. And so by sell through, even if you go and if you saw something that you like this cool dress you have on today, you have to think about your customer, right? And you have to think about it. So walk me through the process in like sort of top line terms. After you go to Milan, you pick out what you think is right for your stores based on data. And then what happens?
Well, based on data, right? Because at the end of the day, everything is linked back to finance, right? Yeah. But as you just said, very good point, and probably one of the most important aspects of being a good buyer is knowing your client. Because the data can only tell you so much. There's so much gray in there that you don't see. And for me, you have to understand the gray areas. And so you said, what do you do after? You actually do a lot more work before you go to Milan or Paris or wherever you're going than you do in after, because you have to prepare yourself. You have to know the client. You have to know the area. You have to know how has it changed, because what happened 3 months ago might not be at all what's happening now.
Yeah.
Analytics will show you things, but certainly not what is not in the numbers. So voids, opportunities, maybe you did buy 2 black dresses, but you should have bought 1 white, 1 black, just because you could have sold more of the white. Maybe the time of the year called for a white versus black, and maybe your client has changed, you know, went from a young to an older woman now, just because that's what the trend is. So you have to understand all of that. So being a buyer, not just sitting behind a computer analyzing it, it's a very important part of your business, but then also going out in the field and taking that analysis and seeing how the rest of the elements can relate to it or can speak more to it.
So it's interesting you say that, when you say go out in the field, and I think this is something I did not know when I, before getting into fashion. You are buying, so you oversee the retail part, right? So it's not the wholesale. Wholesale means Saks and Neiman's and Nordstrom, that's wholesale. The retail section though are your boutiques. How many boutiques do you have with Cavalli?
We currently have 8 full
boutiques.
price plus 4 outlets.
Perfect. And so when you go to Milan, then you are buying for those stores?
I'm buying for the full price stores and e-commerce.
Okay, full price or any e-commerce, fantastic. Okay, great. And so does your buy change per store?
Yes.
It does.
You do have to speak the same language, means the foundation, the starting point, the communication of the season, the communication of the brand for that season, the communication of the creative director will be consistent,
Yeah.
but then you're able to kind of work it to the way you need for that individual market.
Fantastic, perfect. So you were at Max Mara,
Mm-hmm.
and then you went to Versace where we met, and then after Versace, now you're at Cavalli. Can you tell because I think everyone, so they know everyone for the audience, because we always get, how did you get your job? You started off in the store, you went to ask your boss, which I think is super important. Do not wait for people to come to you, I think is a big thing that we learned from this discussion. Feel free to go to your boss and say what you want, because you have to be the navigator of your career. From Max Mara to Versace, how did you get that job?
My former boss at Max Mara moved back to Italy.
Yeah.
And she was approached by Versace. At that time, Versace was going yet again through revamping, rebranding,
Yeah.
all of that. And they were looking for a new team in USA, and they were looking for specific characteristics, specific traits, from specific companies. And she called me, or she referred my name, and they called me.
This is the same boss that helped you move from the store to...
No,
It's a
she
different
was
boss.
in corporate
So
already.
it's two bosses. We talked about this, and I'm gonna say this again. Your internal networking and what you do inside the company is as important, even more important than what you do outside the company. Because it's obvious you start your dream by someone that you were working with, not by someone that you met on the train. And now the move from Max Mara to Versace was with someone who knew you and could vouch for you. And then let's just talk was it also the case with internal networking from Versace to Cavalli?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. I think that's really good to know. It's super good to know. So in terms of the actual, so it seems that you've had lots of different bosses, right?
I've had a few.
Yes, lots of different styles. So just because I know her personally, I know that her bosses have all been extremely different. And one thing I was admired about you is you have this ability to really work with all your bosses and make them happy and proud that you're part of the team, and to also support you. If you can give any tips to our audience about the way to deal with bosses, because it's one thing, people sometimes will say, I only work with this kind of person, but we all know the reality is that's not how life works. You can get any boss from anywhere. So can you just sort of talk about, do you have any secrets, or if you give one piece of advice to our audience about how you work with different bosses, and why have you been so successful with that?
That's a hard one. I think, I've always pride myself in everything I do.
Yeah.
So I never expect anyone to want to work with me for anything other than my actual ability to do my job.
Yeah.
And I think that's been part of it, is being able to prove to each one of these people that I'm capable of doing this job, and I do it to the best of my ability. I mean, I leave nothing behind. I don't compromise. I do 150%. I give 150% plus. And I guess that's been kind of where I have been successful with the bosses. For sure, I've had some that I could have totally lived without. But I think it's really building a relationship. I think it's building a relationship. It doesn't have to be personal, doesn't have to be too personal, but I think it has to be one where you have a trust, where you know there's loyalty, because I think loyalty is probably one of the most important things between anybody in the workplace, right, or anywhere. Yeah. But I think between a subordinate and a supervisor, I think it's very important to have the trust and the loyalty. And I think, I am, as you know, very loyal and very trustworthy and very hardworking. Really, I don't do anything else. I mean, sometimes I can be harsh, sometimes I can be very nice, but most of the time it's really those things. I think I have overcome some difficulties where, I just say I know how to do my job and I know that I'm good at it and no one's gonna tell me otherwise.
Yeah.
And I think that's been maybe the other, but I have to say I've been lucky most of the time. I know it's not always the case, but I've been lucky with the supervisors and the leaders that I've had. Not only have they been great people, but also great leaders and managers, and have been able to teach me a lot.
Great. And I think that you mentioned two things, and I just want to sort of say this again to our audience: loyalty, which I think is super important, and just doing your job. And I do think it does take a practice to, you're not trying to get too personal, but you want them to know that you have their best professional interest at heart.
And you have their back.
Absolutely.
Because I think at the end of the day, you have to have it.
You have to. And when a boss doesn't feel like you do, that's when I've seen things start to get weird, to be honest. So I want to talk about something, because you mentioned it, I didn't say it. You talked about harsh. And you talked about being outspoken. I know the reason why I've enjoyed working with you, and I think it's the same for anyone that's worked with you, and even your bosses. You're a pretty direct person. You don't bite your tongue at all. So tell me what that means. And I have to be, I think it's actually a good quality. I really do like when people are very vocal. Lily back there is laughing at me, but I do. So tell me about that. Do you think that's a good trait? Has it gotten you in trouble? Meaning that have you sometimes said something was like, oh my God, what did I just say? Tell me about that.
Yes, I think that I would not, and I'm sure you can agree, I would not recommend it to everybody. I think it's going back to the relationship that you have within your workplace and with the people and with your boss, let's say. I think I've worked with people that are like, oh, did you just really say that? I think you have to know when to say it and how to say it. And as you said, I don't bite my tongue, and it has gotten me in trouble. But I think what I've been lucky with is I've been able to get out of it, because, I think being direct for sure is a good quality. But politics and all that is probably one of my most challenged areas. I don't know, whatever you want to call it, but I am not good with politics. I am not good with playing games, and that's probably where I can learn. So I recommend being direct, but I recommend being direct with people that like.
Great. And I think this would also be interesting for our audience. Tell me about other strong women who are just as direct as you are in the workplace, and how you work with them. Like, I don't know, if you've ever worked with a direct woman, or a woman.
Well, you. I think that you're one of the most direct people, and I think that's probably one of the reasons we were able to work and get to the same goal. I think you're probably one of the only people that I think I work, I think.
Do you get along with women? Well, I don't know. Do you typically get along with women who will have a strong personality like yours?
Yes, and typically I prefer someone who's direct than someone who is, smiles in your face and then stabs you sort of in the back. So I think that I prefer that. I prefer to know exactly what you're thinking and tell me, no matter how harsh it is, than not know and assume that things are peachy.
Yeah, it's interesting, because I've known about the strongest women that I know in the workplace. They gravitate to other strong women, and sometimes it's tough for you to hear things, but that's how you learn, that's how you develop.
Yes, I agree.
Perfect. All right, so you talked a lot about hard work, and I've seen it firsthand. I've seen a lot of your hard work firsthand, and I actually wrote you something on Women's International Day, because
that made me cry.
I've always been impressed by your stamina and your commitment and passion. Like, really, tell me though, what does that mean in terms of what you've had to sacrifice? And I don't even mean with children, but what have you had to sacrifice in your career because you're so hyper-focused on giving 150% all the time?
Honestly, I don't think anything, because I think that because I'm able to do this 150%, I know that I do my job and I complete it, and I am not, doubting myself or, I guess, punishing myself for not doing it.
Yeah.
So I don't think I have. I mean, I think that for sure there are things that we all could do better, so that's for certain, but I think that I'm not sacrificing anything. I really can't think of anything. I love what I do. I've loved what I've done. And I think that I've been pretty lucky in being able to balance it.
If you could talk about the moment when you were most proud of something you've done in your career, what would that be?
In my career.
Like when were you just like, oh my God, I did that. I hit that number. I didn't think I was gonna be able to do it, and I did it.
I think when we broke even at Versace, and I think you'll remember that.
I do remember that. I do.
So I think that was probably one of the highlights where I can say, I think what's important is that we did it as a team.
Yep.
You know, I obviously can't take credit for anything really because everything is always done with the people
Yeah.
that you work with. So I think that was probably something
Fantastic.
amazing.
Great. And if you could give advice to anyone who wants to be a buyer, so if they're not in a store, maybe they're in college, any advice, 2 or 3 things they should think about in terms of getting, where would they look? Because if people are not gonna go to the store, if they're out of college, where do they look and what do you look for when someone comes to interview with you as a buyer?
Well, first I think you have to be very passionate.
Yeah.
My suggestion if you're still in college is to do an internship because like you said, you wanted to be a buyer. It's not as glamorous as it seems. It's actually not glamorous at all, especially in the first stages of your career. I think eventually, you know, you get to a point where you're able to maybe enjoy some of the aspects that you talked about, that we talked about, but I think at the beginning you are working very hard to get to that. So I think passion, and I think people can read that. Of course, everybody has different qualifications, but for me, passion, someone who is really going to be willing to go above and beyond. And of course, we talked about loyalty. That's for me is very important. As far as where to look, like I said, I think if you do an internship and you do a really good internship, you could probably eventually either land the job there or you can have the company, whoever supports you in trying to find you something. I've been, and I'm saying it from experience because I've been lucky and I've had some amazing interns that I've gone back and hired, whether they were hired for, you know, a specific buying job or just a job within the company, or, you know, when I was looking for someone, these would be the first people I would reach out to. So I think when you're doing an internship, do it as if this was your first job. Don't do it like I'm doing a class, you know, I complete my 8 hours, now it's time for me to go home. Do it like it's your entry level, your first kind of step into your first job.
Which is great advice, because I think a lot of, maybe some of our followers are actually gonna probably start their one of their first internships or the second during the summer. And
I'm looking for interns for the summer.
Fantastic, great. So if anyone is interested in working with Alla and her office as a buyer, please send us your information and we'll make sure Alla gets it. Can you just give me an example? And I'm gonna just talk about this because I wanna make sure that we specify and detail this, because I think this is so important. Like you, a lot of the interns I've either hired or I recommend. And I have helped, and for me, I honestly speaking, when it's an amazing intern, I feel like it's my duty to then help them and mentor them in their career and do all I can to get them another position. Give me an example of a time when an intern did something above and beyond. I can tell you mine, Ben, I had an intern by the name of Ben, and we were preparing for something. Remember Ben? You remember? See, everyone remembers Ben. We were preparing for something for Versace, a fashion show, or at the last minute it was changed from a presentation to fashion show. We were in the office until 4 o'clock in the morning. We had to be back in the office at 7. I get to the office at 7 and Ben is dressed, or like, of course he's dressed, but he's dressed, smile on his face, clipboard in hand, and had a coffee in his hand and gave it to me. I will never forget that, and I'll never forget.
The coffee in his hand, or that he was there?
Well, you know me.
Yes, exactly. That's why I'm asking the question.
So give me a specific example. I think this is very useful if you like say if there's something that an intern did that you're like, wow, I will remember that. So they understand what wow is, because some people think wow is just showing up.
Well, I had this intern who I am happy to say we stay in contact now. I haven't been able to land her anything. I've had some recommendations and I've referred her, but I haven't been able to get her anything as yet. But every time I think of somebody, I think of her. Yeah. She was interning and we were preparing, I think, for a manager's conference, and we needed to have CDs made with videos and things like that, and it was Friday, summer Friday. So now everybody's like, okay, it's 2 o'clock, I'm going home on a summer Friday, or it was, I don't remember now exactly the time of the year, but I remember everybody was going home early. And she was like, no problem, I'll go to a place and I'll print it and I'll have them burned. So she did that on Friday when everyone was like ready to go home. On top of that, we had to get them to Long Island to our boss. And on the weekend, she took the train out and dropped everything off. Of course, it was like, how do you even compare that to anyone or anything? So, as I said, I till this day, and it's been about 5 years now since she interned for me. I remember. Always think, we stay in touch, so that's great. Definitely when something comes up, I always think of her.
Great, fantastic. So we're going to move over into a bit of the style section. And you know how much I love interns. And so if anyone has any questions about interns, let us know, because I do think when you're there, it's not good enough to plop into your seat. You need to go above and beyond, and it's the small things. It's not like you're going to have to like write something to change the world, but it's just that passion and commitment that we love. Style section. Well, let's start with women first of all. Name some powerful women out there that you love their style.
Stacey Henderson.
Thank you very much. You're the third person to say that, so I think it's official. No?
I think so too. 3 hits.
Anybody else? Is there any politicians or actresses or influencers?
Honestly, no.
Oh, wow.
I think there are, but there's nobody that I can say today that, wow, like I follow this person all day, every day. I admire regular people, friends and just colleagues.
What is your go-to pieces? Like if you're talking to women, and so just for the record, Alla is a little bit more extra than me, which I consider myself. I've been told I sometimes can be out there, but Alla is much more out there than I am. So for someone who loves glam and loves to glam it up every day, so what are your pieces that you love? What are your go-to pieces that you just rely on almost season after season?
I love anything with paillettes, so sequins.
Always.
Leather.
Yeah.
I love leather no matter what time, how I feel. And then I think at the end of the day, jeans. I love jeans.
I know.
I love anything denim. It really, if I don't know anything, I'm like, okay, where's a pair of denim? Where is, some bling bling for the top or shoes?
Yep.
And I'm ready.
Speaking of shoes, you have a very vast shoe collection, of course, including it's a pity you guys can't see the shoes she has on today. They are gorgeous. In terms of shoes, or do you have a rule of thumb in terms of your shoes? Is that also blingy, or do women need a pair of black stilettos? What is something that every woman needs in her wardrobe?
Well, believe it or not, whenever I have to wear a pair of black shoes, it is the hardest for me because for some reason I don't have a pair of plain black shoes.
No, she doesn't.
And that's because I'm like, who needs a pair of black shoes? Like, really? And so you end up buying everything other than black. The same thing with a black dress. You know me, black is just, I like it, but I just don't, I feel like I have it, but at the end I don't. I can't really answer that question so well because I probably switch shoes more than I should.
Okay.
But I think you do need a pair of good black. I don't know about stilettos, but something, like I love the boots you're wearing today, little booties. I think you could have a pair of booties for the winter and a nice sandal for, spring, summer.
Okay.
Then you could put it on with a pair of tights in the winter, so I don't think you need a pump, but yes, ideally, I guess.
If I'm interviewing for a job as a buyer, and I was coming to your office to meet with you, what are some things I should not wear?
You should just come pretty plain.
Really?
Yes. Believe it or not,
what?
When I go on interviews, I am dressed in monotone, either navy, black, gray. There is very minimal flashiness.
Really?
That's the word.
And then you surprised them day one.
Yes, exactly.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
So
do you remember much of Versace on your interview?
Yes, I wore a pair of black pants and a black turtleneck on
Max
my
Mara?
first interview. Max Mara, you know what? I don't remember because I had already worked for about 1.5 years at the store, so I might have just been wearing like my uniform suit.
Okay.
But you know what? What's funny is that if somebody does come to an interview with me dressed in a crazy way, they're automatically like disqualified.
Really?
Because An interview should be all about the person and not be influenced by the way they're dressed. Because if you're coming in with sequins shoes, well, of course I'm gonna love you because you're wearing sequins shoes, and you can totally like distract me. And that's how I feel. When I'm going in an interview, they shouldn't be looking at the way I'm dressed, because quite frankly, I've seen people that dress and they can't do anything.
Yeah,
You know.
yeah.
And you know that very well. So I think that, so that's kind of my motto, like go very plain, let the person get to know you
Yeah.
versus what you look like.
This
That's why I
is
have
so,
no
I'm so
picture.
shocked.
I have no picture on my LinkedIn profile. I have no pictures anywhere where it's professionally concerned.
Wow, that is so interesting. So if for those of you who are going to apply for Alla's internship, don't walk in sequins and whatever, and leather black pants or whatever. So we're wrapping up, but I have 2 more questions for you before we play our game. Who is a woman who's influenced you in your career?
I would have to say my grandmother, and then it's not a woman, but I think my dad.
Okay.
He's always been into fashion when I was growing up, and
He's pretty fashionable.
yes. And I think my grandmother definitely.
Great, fantastic. And last but not least, I want to hear about your first job you've ever had. I don't care if it was at a fast food restaurant. I don't care if it was like promoting, I don't know, something at Times Square. What is your very first job that you've ever had in your life?
Well, actually, it was babysitting. Therapy office.
And what were you doing there?
I was just helping the physical therapist, like clean up and, get towels and all of that, which is why I went into healthcare, because I said, okay, this is, I kind of like it. I mean, I was able to work there for a couple of years.
Okay. So there you have it. I am the only fashion girl who started off in fast food. Everyone else had great jobs starting out. So, Alla, before we go, first of all, before we go, we have a game on our Keep app. If you don't have the Keep app, please download it. It's Keep Shopping in the App Store. And we have a game called Keep It, Toss It. And so it's sort of like the do's and the don'ts. So keep it, if you're on our app, you can play the game. Keep it as you swipe to the right. If you toss it, which means you want to get rid of, it's like a don't to the left, right? So we're going to do Keep It, Toss It. You tell me if these things are to keep or to toss. Black leggings.
Leggings are tight.
Leggings.
Okay, well, you could wear them to the gym, so you could keep them.
Okay. Birkin bag.
Toss it. Well, actually, you could repair it if you're creative enough.
What do you mean repair it?
You could figure out a way to repair a broken bag.
No, a Birkin bag.
Oh, a Birkin bag! You see? It's the accent. For me, I don't personally like Birkins, but I guess if we really have to think about it, you keep it.
Okay. You know, it's so funny. A couple people said toss. Maybe they thought I meant broken. Okay, disco sparkles during the day.
Keep it.
Keep it, keep it. Chunky necklaces.
Keep it.
Plaids.
Keep it.
Stripes.
Keep it.
Okay. Gold metallic shoes.
Absolutely keep it.
Lace corsets.
Yeah, you know what? I pulled one out from my closet from about 20 years ago.
So you're keeping it?
Yeah.
Okay. Millennial pink.
Ooh, that's a toughie. I would toss it, I guess.
Toss it. Fanny packs.
Oh my God. Toss it.
By the way, I was like this in meetings. She gets very passionate about trends. That's why she can buy it. Sock booties.
What?
Sock booties. You know the booties that look like socks?
Oh, yes. Keep it.
Okay. 6-inch heels.
Yes, keep it.
Bomber jackets.
Keep.
Statement earrings.
Yes, keep.
Like the ones you have on that are awesome. Off-the-shoulder tops for the summertime.
I think you could keep it.
Pom-poms, like the pom-pom embellished slides, bags.
Yeah.
Keep it.
Keep it.
Cool. So there you have it from Alla, the buyer herself who knows
Hence
all.
my closet.
Exactly. That's okay. I'll come over and help you get rid of some things. Thank you very much. Well, listen, thank you all so much for joining. And Alla, thank you so much. This was so special because you know I'm your #1 fan, and I hope you come back to visit Keep as much as possible. By the way, we have our last person. When is it, Lily? Mimi's coming in next week. We have a designer. So for all of you aspiring designers out there, we have someone that's going to come in and talk about how they moved up the ladder But we are extremely excited about today, and we hope that you guys got something out of it. Thanks, Alla.
And thank you, Stacy. Thank you, Lily. It was absolutely amazing. I was a little nervous at the beginning, but then you know me.
You're a pro.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.